This is a story that's been very much in the headlines this week with the failed rebellion in Russia by Putin's own mercenary henchman, Yevgeny Prigozhin. The world held its breath because Russia has more nuclear weapons than any country on the planet. And I want to take us to our first question from Tiani in Manchester, which is about Russia. Tiani?
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. I have heard and read that you believe that Russia has acted in good faith towards trying to resolve the war in Ukraine. And I'm wondering if that is actually your position, and how would you bring peace to the region without emboldening Putin and threatening democratic self-government around the world?
Well, that is a bit of a misstatement of what I said. What I said was that in April of 2022, the war began on February 24th, 2022. In April, there was a peace outreach by Putin and Zelensky. And they actually signed a peace agreement and at that time. And Boris Johnson was dispatched by the White House to sabotage that agreement. The Russians were acting in good faith. After signing that agreement, they were actually withdrawing troops from the area around Kiev. So it was clear that they were operating in good faith at that point, and we were not operating in good faith. We should be trying to settle this war through diplomacy. Since then, there have been 350,000 Ukrainian kids that have been killed, and we've turned that nation into a proxy war between Russia and the United States. And by the way, we were told this was a humanitarian exercise. If it was humanitarian, it means reducing bloodshed and shortening the conflict. But when President Biden was asked, why are we over there? He said, for regime change of Vladimir Putin. In April of 2021 or 2022, his defense secretary, Lloyd Austin, said that the reason for America's presence in the Ukraine is to degrade the Russian military and exhaust its capacity to operate anywhere in the world. That is the opposite of a humanitarian mission. That is a mission about a war of attrition in which the people who are dying are Ukrainians.
And that's when you say you would negotiate a solution what does that look like? Do you award President Putin of Russia part of Ukraine?
We know what the solution would look like because the Russians have agreed to the solution twice. Once they agreed to the Minsk Accords, and the Minsk Accords, which were agreed to by Germany, by France, and by Russia, maintained Donbass as part of the Ukraine. By the way, the Donbass voted to leave the Ukraine 90 to 10, out 90% to 10%.
You're talking about the elections last year?
No, the earlier elections, and Putin refused to take them. So Putin did not. But let me finish this. The Donbass or the Minsk Accords, which all those countries agreed on, and then in 2019, Zelensky ran for president for the first time. He's a comedian and actor with no political experience. He won on a peace platform with 70% of the vote. His campaign was, I will sign them and ratify the Minsk Accords if I'm elected. And as soon as he got elected, he pivoted. Why? Because of U.S. pressure from the neocons, from Victoria Nuland and the neocons in the White House. They did not want peace. And because of pressure from ultra-nationalists within the Ukraine who said they were going to kill him if he signed the accord.
But if you negotiate with Putin right now and get him to stop his invasion, I know you said you're not defending Putin, but he's an accused war criminal. He poisons his enemies and imprisons his enemies. He's an autocrat. So if you award him part of Ukraine, what message are you sending to dictators and autocrats around the world who are looking to neighboring countries thinking, hey, I want some of that?
When my uncle was president and his military apparatus wanted him to go to war with Vietnam, with Laos, with Cuba, with the Soviet Union during the Berlin crisis in 1982, he said, you have to put yourself into the shoes of your adversary if we're going to have peace. You have to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the adversary and see the world from their perspective and recognize their legitimate security concerns. Now, we have through a series of provocations, including unilaterally walking away from the two medium-range nuclear missile treaties with Russia, which we all signed, and President Trump and President Obama walked away from those. We promised in 1992 that we would, after the Russians made a huge concession to us of leaving 400,000 troops out of Germany, allowing us to consolidate East and West Germany under NATO control, which was an adversary army to them. And they said, the one thing we want from you is that you will not move NATO 1 inch to the east. And Secretary of State Baker said at that time, famously, we will not move NATO 1 inch to the east. Since then, we have moved it 1,000 miles to the east and 14 countries, and we put Aegis missile systems in Romania and Poland right near Russia's border. When Russia put nuclear missiles in Cuba, which is farther away than we now have, to Moscow, we would have invaded if they hadn't withdrawn them. My uncle was president then. We would have gone in. And my uncle knew why the Russians had done that. He did it because they did it, Khrushchev did it, because we had put nuclear missile systems, Jupiter systems, in Italy and in Turkey. And my uncle, my father, met with Ambassador Dobrynin secretly and made a secret deal. If you remove your missiles now, we will take ours out of Turkey. So, the Russians have been invaded 3 times through the Ukraine. The last time they were invaded, the Germans killed 1 out of every 7 Russians. They destroyed 1/3 of Russia to rubble. They burned the fields. It's as if my uncle said this in his 1963 speech at American University. He said they destroyed the equivalent of destroying the entire part of the United States from the East Coast to Chicago. Imagine if all the wheat fields, all the forests were burned, all the cities reduced to rubble. That's what was done. They have a legitimate concern about us moving NATO into the Ukraine. We would never let them put missile systems in Canada or Mexico. We would invade if they did that, and we have to be able to put ourselves in their positions.
We have a lot of questions to get to, but you know that the vast majority of Democrats fully and consistently have supported President Biden on his support of Ukraine in this war. You seem to be out of step with the voters of the party that you're asking
That
about.
doesn't make it right, Elizabeth. That does not make it right. We need to be a moral nation. We need to restore our moral authority around the world. If every Democrat is against me on that, I'm still going to say it. I'm going to tell people the truth. And our leadership.
And you think giving part of Ukraine to Putin is restoring our moral
I
authority?
didn't say giving part of the Ukraine to Putin. Putin agreed originally to leave Ukraine alone if we signed the agreement. So, Putin was not demanding any part of Ukraine, even though the ethnic Russians voted 90-10 in the Donbass to join Russia. He said no. Oh, I don't know what the negotiation would look like exactly, but I know what they agreed to before, and it was a reasonable agreement. They just did not want NATO to go into Ukraine, and we said we don't care. By the way, when we originally said that we were going to do this, George Kennan, who is the most important diplomat in American history, he was the architect of the containment policy after World War II. He is a deity in American statesmanship. He said, if you go into the Ukraine, you're going to force the Russians to have a violent response. William Perry, who was Bill Clinton's Secretary of State, said, if you go into the Ukraine with NATO, I'm going to resign because you are forcing the Russians to retaliate violently. And William Burns, who is now the head of the CIA, was then the U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, said the same thing. He said, you cannot move NATO into the Ukraine because it is going to force the Russians to retaliate violently. And he called it a red line. He said, if you cross that red line, Russia is going to have to go into the Ukraine. So all of us knew that. All of our diplomats knew that. And the comic book depiction that the American people have been told by their leadership, I want to tell you something. The seats that you're sitting on today, do you know who first had put those seats in here? The very seats you're sitting on. Donahue, Phil Donahue. Phil Donahue was the most important, the most popular daytime host. And you know what happened to him at the height of his popularity? He told the truth about the Iraq war. He said there are no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. 2 days later, he lost his job. And that's why those seats are empty. So we have to, and now we all know he was right. So what I'm saying today, I know 10 years from now, everybody's going to understand this is the truth. We have been lied to by our press, by our government, and we need to start hearing the truth, and we need to stop paying attention to these comic book depictions that say there's bad guys and good guys, and America's always the good guy, and we never make mistakes. We have to